then really, really, really early on, I discovered, rhyming,
Mm.
very early as well, too. You know what I mean? So like not too long, I say maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years into breakdancing. Like
So you're like
I started
10-ish,
rapping.
right? Like, just to be
Yeah, I
clear,
already started rapping. I was
10.
battling, playing the dozens, battling in the lunchroom. It went from playing the dozens, every day at the lunchroom. We would just rib on
Can
each
you?
other, and then cats started rapping and ribbing. We talk freestyling and playing the dozens, and I just was all into that. You know what I mean? And that's when it really started just rapping. We would battle every day in the lunchroom, and I did that all the way through junior, from elementary all the way through junior high.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So you're basically simultaneously doing the b-boy thing, and you're out there just kind of rapping at the same time, and
Yeah,
you're all
yeah,
doing this at like
and
10,
graffiti
11.
too.
Oh,
And graffiti
say
too. I
word.
started I started I started getting up with the graffiti, carrying my markers with me. It's a whole, that's what I'm saying. Like the whole I was engulfed into the culture. I wasn't just like breakdancing. I became obsessed with the culture.
Right.
And at that time I didn't even know it was a culture. Like I just was doing everything that had to do with hip hop. You know what I mean? Breaking, doing graffiti, listening to the music, you know what I mean? Just all of that. Dressing, talking, using the slang. Like I just adapted everything that had to do with hip hop.
I think it's dope, but it's also like, listen, whenever I hear somebody saying like they doing all this shit at like 12 and like years deep at like 12, like that's incredible, man. Like, it's just truly incredible. Like, a lot.
And it was new. It was new. It was brand new. It was the grown folks didn't understand it. You know what I mean? My moms just didn't understand it. I'm like getting my hair cut. Like, yeah, I want to get my head shaved on the side with some lines and I want to tail. My mom's like, what the fuck are you talking? They didn't understand it. You know what I mean?
That's that's definitely understandable. So yeah, you're basically running all that throughout high school, I guess, or you said up until middle school. I'm in Montreal where there's primary school and high school, so there's no middle school. So I
Sure,
often
sure,
forget about
sure.
that. So what happens then? I guess as you move into high school, are you still in Syracuse this whole time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I actually didn't even go to high school. Or I got kicked out of middle school in seventh grade and had to go to an alternative school.
Mm,
So yeah, like I said, man, it just everything just started mixing in. You know what I mean? And my mom was a single mother. I started getting involved with the streets too as well.
right.
You know what I mean? So now everything was intertwining with each other. You know what I mean? Now you older, you need money to buy these sneakers, you need money to buy these clothes. You know what I mean? So now I'm getting involved with street shit, trying to make some money to, emulate what I'm seeing, Run DMC with the gold chains and, the Adidas and all that shit like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, man. So I didn't really participate in high school until probably, which what would have been my 11th year. But instead of going into the 11th grade, I just went to a GED half a day type of class.
Mm.
So, but by that point, you know, I was at every lunchroom at every high school in my city battling. I was running around the city battling everybody, rapping. Wasn't even thinking about breakdancing at that point.
Right.
Breakdancing had kind of faded out. You know what I mean? And it was all about just rhyming for me.
And it was more about battling, or did you like? I guess at that point nobody's thinking about songs and shit, right?
It was all about just being the nicest,
Right.
going to whatever school, jumping into whatever cipher, and being the nicest, and just getting your props off and getting your name up. You know what I mean? Similar to graffiti, just getting your name up.
Right. Because I mean that's quite literally what you do in graffiti. I
'Cause
I find the culture really fascinating. I didn't know a lot about it until I started talking to some graph writers, and they're like, "Yeah, you don't know shit." I'm like, "Fair enough." And then I learned a lot about it, and just the way the styling goes, the lettering. But then I started seeing it everywhere, and you start looking at ones and like, how the fuck did you go there? Like you start seeing shit that's like, how did a human being get that one? And
Yeah, we
that's
definitely did some dangerous shit when I was running around doing pieces around this city. And we definitely did some questionable things and put ourselves in some different situations we probably shouldn't have been in.
y'all alive. Yeah, made it through.
Yeah,
It's all
nah,
good.
for sure. It's a fact. It's a fact.
That's it. Like you would basically, without like, you'd have to go, because like I'm looking at something like, yo, you definitely doing things I'm too afraid to go do. Like, or especially when they climb up to like billboards and shit, and I'm like, straight up, you
Yeah,
went
we was
all the way
definitely
up
doing
to the
that.
motherfucking billboard, and wow, that's bold.
Yeah, see, because in Syracuse there's no trains. You
Mm.
understand? We don't have. There is no hitting the trains and none of that. So like, when we was doing graffiti out here in Syracuse, the places that we would look to get up in is like underneath the bridges and the highways, you know, um, on top of buildings that you could see from the highway, rooftops. So we did a lot of rooftop, a lot of
Oh, like
rooftop.
if you're on the
uh,
highway and you can like
how you
look
can see
down.
rooftops. So we would try to we would get as many anything that was visual from the highway or just on the streets or in the parks, handball courts and things of that nature. You know what I mean? We didn't have and we didn't. I never got into hitting freight trains. I kind of got out of the graffiti before the freight train, before the crew started hitting freight trains. But yeah, we didn't have no subways or nothing like that, so we had to deal with like just looking for get up anywhere. You know what I mean? That's gonna be seen.
Right. And so with that mentality, you bring, because that, what's interesting is how all these things kind of like tie into the way that MCs approach the shit, right? So if a lot of people's coming from like b-boys and graph writing, that's a lot about like getting yourself visible, almost being loud and present. it,
Absolutely.
it explains how the battling kind of route just kind of naturally ties into it in a way where, let's say you're
Right.
looking at it on Google 20 years later, it's not such a it's actually not a clear path. Like it's super hard to like make these kinds of connections. So I personally appreciate the fact that you're sharing all this.
Yeah, for sure, man. Shout out to my dude Kid 40, man. Act 2, aka Kid 40. You know what I'm saying? That was my graffiti partner right there, man. He's one of the he probably got up more than anybody in this city.
That's dope. And then you're doing the battling thing, and it's not like organized. It's more just like y'all battle
Nah,
and you just
this
running
was
through.
this was just my homie Seth would hit me up. He went to Nottingham. He was like my DJ at one point when I started to get into recording music. He would hit me up. Yo, I got these kids in the lunchroom, blah 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 blah. Yo, you got to come up here, da 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 da. Come do your thing. So I would go to Nottingham and go battle some cats. You know what I mean? Or up to Corcoran or Fowler, Henniger. These are all the high schools. You know what I mean? I battled at every last one of them. Or we would just go to other people's blocks and go battle. You know what I mean? At the basketball court on somebody's block, like it just was whatever. The after parties. You know what I mean? The little house parties. Salute my dude Robbo and my dude Paulie Paul. We used to be on the west side of Syracuse, New York, man, killing all them little house parties.
That's dope. That's an interesting grind. Like it's almost like you have to go out in order to get it.
Yeah,
Like there's no sitting
yeah,
at
for
home. Like
sure.
you just literally have to be there, and that allows you to meet the people and kind of build up that local stuff. I do at some point. Do you start getting to like mixtapes and recording?
It's funny because I should have been. I started recording with my dude Sal. He was the first person I recorded with. My dude Sal, aka Test One, aka Ferragamo. He is when you talking about Syracuse engineers, he's like one of the dopest engineers out here if you want to get your shit sounded right. There's definitely other engineers and studios, but his studio is well known out here. Red Brick Records, salute to them. I started recording with him when I was about 14. Um, and then I started recording with my other homie Seth when I was about 15, 16. Um, but then by the time I was like 16, I was really heavy on the block into the streets.
Mm.
So by the time I was 17, I got locked up. You know what I mean? So when I should have been really chasing a rap career, I was just in the streets, doing shit I shouldn't have been doing.
I mean, life was different then. It's a different reality.
Oh, for
And
sure.
you still clocked probably more experience up to that point than some people I know in the game today.
For sure. I mean, I never stopped. I never stopped rhyming like ever. You know what I mean? So, but it wasn't until I have to say it wasn't until like 98. This is a long time. This is a long period. So it wasn't until about 98 I started recording records for real and was like, I'm going to figure out a way to put this music out, get this music out. And then in 1999, my boy Mikey Childs, salute Mikey Childs, Red Brick Records. Um, he was just like, yo, Just, you talented, let's go. I'm gonna sign you to my label. I'm gonna put your music out. So that's what we did. That's when I started. I started putting music out in '99.
So I guess between then you just had other focuses in life in that period.
Just but the in between time was I was always writing, always rhyming, always battling, but I was in them streets getting money. I wasn't thinking about being a rapper. You know what I mean? Where I'm from, that was a far fetched dream. It just was never gonna come. It was never gonna happen. Like there was no hope for that. You know what I mean?
Can you,
Upstate New York.
yeah, can you
Upstate.
elaborate on that?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Upstate New York is not like living in New York City, man. You know what I mean? There's nobody famous where I'm from. You understand? People don't come where I'm from and become stars and make it. So there was no inspiration there, you
Mm,
know? So, it it's kind of a hopeless type of a city. You know what I mean? Because it's a small city. It's not a big city like like a Philly or Detroit. You know what I mean? It's just a small little rinky-dink city, and I love my city. Trey One Fever, salute. But everybody that's from here, they know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? And back then when we was doing music, wasn't nobody out here doing music. I mean, in '99 when I had put my vinyl out, man, you could probably count on one hand how many rappers from my city had put out vinyl
mm, that's
on
huge.
one hand. This in 1999. You know what I mean? Maybe two hands, but what I'm saying is very few. Nobody was when we started really doing music and trying to get on. Nobody out here was real. There really wasn't that many people from my city trying to do that. Mostly everybody would be like, "Oh, you trying to be a rapper, man? Fuck out of here, bro." You know what I'm saying? Even my homies, even my dudes that I was around every day. You know what I mean? It's like I had two different sets of friends. I had my dudes on the streets, you know what I mean, that I used to be, and then I had my dudes who I did music with.
Right. So you basically get signed to the label, and at
Mhm.
that point, okay, being in Syracuse, how do you get hip hop at that point? Because it's still pre-internet. I know you're not in New York
Well,
City.
yeah,
It's
and
a
I
bit
mean
different.
by 1999, I mean even by the the mid mid to later 80s, we started, you got concerts, people are coming up, the music is getting, you can actually go and buy the music in the record store. I remember my first two records that I bought was Fat Boys and Run DMC. I bought them at the same time, you know what I mean? The vinyl. So at that point you were able to go into record theater. That was the name of the spot that we used to buy music from. And then there was a bunch of other little mom and pop joints too, Cole's Music World. And then there was another one up on the east side. The name eludes me. um I can't think of the name, or maybe that was Cole's. I can't think of the name, but there's a couple mom and pop shops that was just you could get all your hip hop from. So at that point, you were able to
Mm.
buy all the new shit, or buy like people would go to the city and get tapes of Hot 97, just recordings of Hot 97, and put them on tapes, and they'd be selling them out of the store. So we would be able to get all of that stuff as well. Like all the radio freestyles and all the Roxanne battles and all that stuff. We were able to get all of that stuff at that point.
Okay, it's dope still. And when I think about Syracuse, the only thing I can think of is I'm pretty sure that's where Montrealers go when people don't come to Canada. Like that's the only thing I thought about it. Like, what do I know about Syracuse? And then I looked at it, I'm like, oh shit, that's where I would go when the tour comes close enough. That's the closest New York City to Montreal if you're gonna go see some shit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty. I mean, we're not. I think Syracuse. I think from Syracuse you can get to some one portion of Canada in like 2 hours or something like that, maybe three. I
Yeah,
know Buffalo. Buffalo was the closest, I believe, to Canada.
but they're close to another part of Canada that's much farther from me. Like they all up in
Yeah,
Ontario by
sure.
Toronto
They're like
or
well, Niagara
Hamilton.
Falls is
Yeah,
closest. Yeah,
and then but on the Montreal side, I'm pretty sure Syracuse is where we go, or some shit in Vermont. I don't know what's in Vermont, but so, you know what I mean. It's Vermont, so Syracuse is probably really where we'd go for most shit, because that seems to be like whatever. But I've not seen it on a bunch of tour flyers. I'm like, shit, if I'm gonna go, it's gonna be there, and then you just never end up going because it's a lot pricier than not, you know. But with all that being said, you're basically one of the first guys to press a vinyl at that time. So what are some of the influences that are running your thing? Because like I guess unlike a lot of the more New York guys, it's not like you're ingratiated into these moving parts of the scene that are kind of happening and seeing homies on your block become TV stars and shit. So
yeah.
with
It's just
that,
not, that's not happening at all.
what is some of the shit that you're fucking with at that time that you would call some of the influences you had?
Well, my dude Mike, who called me and was like, "Yo, come, let's do this music." He had a prior situation. Him and a couple of my other dudes I was used to rap, was rapping with. You know what I mean? Shout out to the whole 422 alum. They had a group called the Mad Pack. And when Mad Pack was doing their thing, I was locked up. Or most likely, I would have been involved with that. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, I wasn't. You know what I mean? But through that, my dude Mikey was part of that, and he, they were all over the place. They were actually doing shows. I mean, they were going to all the Jack the Rappers, these are rapper conventions, music conventions. They were doing shows all over the United States. I mean, they were doing shows alongside people like Biggie, who just weren't even big names yet. You know what I mean? So they were rocking with, like, people, leaders of the new school. Like, they're around all of these, they're doing shows all over the place with these dudes. And Mikey is learning the game while he's doing this. You know what I mean? Um, and unfortunately, they put out an album and all that shit, and it did well. You know what I mean? But it didn't crack. It didn't crack the pavement like it should have. You
Right.
know what I mean? So they came back to the town. They went through what they went through. People started going their separate ways. Mikey wanted to keep the label going, and he hit me up. Was like, "Yo, Just, you nice? Stop playing around. Let's put this music out." So that's how that came about. And so Mikey was privy to how to grind it out.
Mm-hmm.
So he would, he knew who to send my records to. You know what I mean? We put out the first 12-inch. He got in touch with Right On magazine. So, he got me a write up in Right On magazine. I don't know if you remember that magazine, but
I've never heard of that magazine.
yeah,
Or
Right
read it.
On magazine. Right On magazine was before the Source. You know what I mean? That was the magazine.
Okay, 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 yeah.
Word Up, and Right On. Those two magazines. Those were the magazines. Biggie taught Word Up magazine.
Yeah.
But those were the two magazines. So I got a write up in that. Um, and Mikey just started working my records through the
Uh,
college scene.
That's cool that you got to write up in a classic fucking hip hop magazine because that's
Fact,
impossible now. You can't do
fact.
that ever again. That's like a legendary thing, all things considered.
I mean, the magazine gone. It's over. It's over with. You know what I mean?
Like you can get some internet shit now, but it'll never be like with the power that the magazines had. It'll never
Yeah,
be
yeah. I mean,
that.
back then the grind was very different, man. Like, the grind was very different. The cost to make things happen was very, very different. Studios back then, we ended up we were right on the cusp of kind of like the studio equipment starting to become a little bit more valuable to to people, and it not being so expensive. Like, I never recorded on a reel to reel, so I missed that. You know what I mean? I
Right.
dodged that bullet with where you had to go to the studio and it was $100 an hour no matter what you do. Just to put out a demo was going to cost you thousands of dollars, which was probably the reason why when I was younger I just was like, yeah, this music shit is not for me. There's no where I'm going to do this music at. You know what I mean?
That's a
And
huge point. Oh, I don't think a lot of people think about that, right? What you just
yeah,
said there, $1,000 to do some shit that is like maybe gonna go nowhere in a
yeah,
time
no,
when nobody believes in you.
and during that time it cost money to make music unless you was doing some cheap shit and making some pause tapes and rap. There was ways to make some cheap joints, but if you were going to really put out a nice demo, it was going to cost you some bread. So at that time I just wasn't focused on it. You know what I mean? Like I said, man, like people around here just didn't believe in that type of shit. Like, oh, you ain't never gonna make, you ain't never gonna be shit, you ain't never gonna make it doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel that. Apparently, Saf Max says that's my pops. So I just thought I would share that. That's dope. Stills, man. Honestly, I think it's really, I think it's a lot. It's really real to a lot of people. Like Montreal didn't have no pop and hip hop scene back in the day. There's a lot of places that, I mean, Montreal's a weird place, but like, there's a lot of places that are in the same kind of like psyche that get expressed like that, where it's like it's not New York City. We got that other version of a reality. So I think it's super interesting to hear it, especially because you're so close to New York City that it could be just so
Yeah,
drastically
4 hours
different.
away.
Um,
4 hours away.
and it's like that 4 hours is just like apples and oranges.
Salute to my baby girl too. She tuning in.
That's so cool, honestly.